Hi guys, welcome to Book Time. My name's Julia. Today I'm going to be talking about all the books I read in July. Can't even remember what month we're in. I was going to say May, but that is long gone. And June's gone too. Wow, I am going crazy. Okay, July. I didn't have a great reading. Well, I did have a good reading month. I didn't finish that many books. I only finished 4 books, and in fact one of them I finished this morning, which is actually the 1st of August, but I was almost finished it, so I had the tiniest amount to go. So I'm sort of saying like I read it in July because like over 400 pages of it got read in July. So I'm also going to talk about what the other books I'm currently in the middle of that I didn't finish. So yeah, I'll just go through them. One of them was The Peacock Detectives. I think this was the first one by Carly Nugent, shortlisted for the Text Prize, which is an unpublished manuscript award run by Text Publishing. But it also won the Readings Children's Book Prize this year. I think that's what the award's called. And it's got an awesome cover. It's super duper cute. And it was really good. It was not what I expected. I expected, and look, I knew nothing about this book going into it, but just based on the cover, I was like, oh, this will probably be a cute book about a girl trying to find some missing peacocks, and it's like a mystery detective story. It kind of was that, but it also was very serious and about all sorts of things like mental health and family dysfunction, all told from the perspective of this like 12 or 11-year-old girl and her best friend Jonas. And oh, the baby's crying. I'll go and get him. Does anyone else find it really hard to get the camera straight? I feel like, is that better? I can't even tell. Anyway, this is the first chance I've had to return to my July haul video I'm currently reading. I haven't even dried my hair, but I'm taking what I can get. I've got a hot chocolate, which I accidentally filled up with mostly water instead of milk. Normally I do it milk with a little bit of water, not water with like a dash of milk. But you know what? It's still got sugar in it, so again, I'll take what I can get. I think what I was talking about was The Peacock Detectives, and it turned out to be a lot more serious than I thought, but it was really, really good, and some of the best descriptions of mental illness I've ever read, particularly, well, I think it was depression. It's never really named because it's the story's narrated by a young child, as I said. So, but she talks about how she describes what her dad is like on these particular days that she calls those days, like he's having one of those days. But she also has those days sometimes, and just her description of how she feels and what she observes in her dad, I identified with so strongly. It was really well written without leaning on any stereotypes or jargon or anything like that. So I think it would be really great for kids too, if they're experiencing that in themselves, or if they've got other people in their life going through that. I think it would be a really like effective starting point for discussion, really. And this story itself was really moving. So I really recommend this one if you're into middle grade, or if you've got kids. It's a really, really good one. So that was the first one I read. Well, I think it was one of the last ones I finished, but I started it at the start of July. The next 2 that I finished, I'm not going to talk about in great detail. I've done separate review videos of them already. And the first one was The Death of Noel Glass by Gail Jones, which was shortlisted for the Miles Franklin Award this year. Pardon me, I buddy read it with Jacqueline and Natalie, and it was okay. At the time, I thought I enjoyed it a bit, and in hindsight, it was okay. It was sort of, I won't go into it, but basically it was about a guy and his sister whose dad died, and them dealing with their grief, mostly in Italy. There's also an art theft chucked in there as well. But I'll link my review down below. The other one I read that was from the Miles Franklin shortlist was The Lebs by Mohammed, Ahmad, which was excellent. It was so good. I've been recommending it left, right, and centre, and that is about young Lebanese Muslim boys in Sydney. Not boys, sort of like young men. I mean, they're in high school. And it's about kind of masculine youth culture. That one's really good. I'll link my review for that down below as well. The other one I finished, well, the one I finished on the 1st of August, but I basically read the entirety of it during July, is Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. I started off really loving this and loving the characterization of the two main characters, but overall it was okay. Like, it was an easy read and it was fun, but I didn't realize it was written so long ago. Well, not that long ago, but in 1990 or whatever. And so a lot of the language felt a bit dated in terms of what we would now consider politically correct. And so that jarred a bit for me, some of the stuff that was a bit racist. Like, the jokes were not explicitly racist, but they were clearly informed by a type of language that we don't use. Like, yeah, you probably wouldn't get away with using now. So, yeah, that was sort of just made it not that great to read at times. And the story was good, and I definitely will still watch the TV show, but I suppose for me, sometimes the humour was a bit just not my style. You know, like really long-winded descriptions of characters or situations that are funny but not really relevant to the main story. They're just there to sort of be witty, which some people really love, and I just get a bit sick of it sometimes. And that's okay. Just wasn't necessarily for me, but I do really want to watch the show because I hear that's really great, even from people who haven't read the book or from people who didn't much like the book. So there's that one too. So I'm actually so far already having a much better reading month during August, and I think it's because of Women in Translation month and the momentum I'm sort of getting from that. But these, I'm just going to go through all the books I'm also in the middle of that I've sort of put on pause for Women in Translation month because I don't want to forget them and they're good. So the first one is oh, can you see that's a bit glary? A Sand Archive by Gregory Day. This is another Australian one from the Miles Franklin shortlist. It didn't win, actually. The winner's since been announced. It was Too Much Lip by Melissa Lukashenko, which I plan to read next month. I have it waiting for me next to my bed. This is really good. It's out through Picador, and Gregory Day is, I wouldn't say he's a well-known Australian writer. I had heard of him because years ago, well, not that many, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I read a short story in Island magazine, which is a Tasmanian-based sort of literary and writing cultural magazine. And there was a short story in it that I absolutely adored. I thought it was so well written, and I kept that issue of the magazine because I love the short story so much. And it happened to be by Gregory Day, and I remembered it when I saw that this book had been shortlisted, and I was like, oh, I have to get that book because that short story was so good. And I'm really enjoying it so far. It's basically, it's set, well, it starts off being set on the Great Ocean Road, which is a big stretch of road along the coast in my home state, Victoria. It's really close to where I grew up, so I spent a lot of time there as a kid. It's still, that area of Victoria is probably one of my favourite places in the world, and some of it's set there, so that's really great. And it's about an engineer who, it's set when that road was being built, post World War II. And it's basically about an engineer trying to work out how the sand dunes work to build a better road, but which sounds really boring. But essentially it's mostly about how the sand functions as this whole metaphor for like movement and, you know, life as movement. And he ends up going to Paris to do all this research, and it's sort of also about the protests in, you know, French university protests in Paris during the 1960s. It's about all sorts of things. I'm making a really hack job of explaining it to you. I'm only 100 pages in, so that's maybe why. So hopefully when I finish this next month, I will report back. I'm trying to read through the whole short list. So I think there was one that Natalie and Jacqueline and I tried to read and were DNF'd. That was A Stolen Season by Rodney Hall. He's written a number of books. I don't think I've read any of his other books, but a lot of people who have read his other books said that they were a lot better than this one, so no one really knows why it was shortlisted. And frankly, it just didn't have an interesting plot or storyline, and there was a female character he'd written that basically felt like he was just trying to create the most downtrodden female character he could, and so everything bad happened to her. She had had a stillbirth. Her husband turned out to be a complete fraudster who had committed identity theft and was embezzling money through all these companies that he'd set up in her name, and then he left her while she was in hospital having the stillbirth, and then she had to flee the country because the authorities thought she was involved in all this crime, and then she ends up trying to commit suicide, and then she gets raped, and then it turns out her father was also abusive, and it was just like, okay, we get it. Like, to create a meaningful female character who's going through some hard times, you don't need to throw everything at the book at her. It just felt like he didn't really understand women, or even one. You don't even have to understand women, because women, anyway, I'm not going to get into that whole debate, but basically it was poorly done and we DNF'd it. But I have 2 more to go on the short list, and hopefully I'll get to them next month. I'm also reading, where's it gone? A Galaxy of Her Own, Amazing Stories of Women in Space by Libby Jackson. I'm really interested in space and space science, and this is kind of like a, I guess it's probably for kids. Like, you probably couldn't read this yourself. Middle grade and older readers could probably read it themselves, but I'm reading it to Harry, try and read him a story or so every day. And it's written by Libby Jackson, she was a flight controller, and she's a human space flight expert, so it's really cool. And it's just basically stories of a whole lot of different women from all different countries who have been involved in human spaceflight in some way, shape or form, whether it's through being a physicist or a mathematician or a scientist or an engineer or an astronaut or a flight controller. It's really cool. So I'm really enjoying this one. I recommend it. If you're into space, this is pretty good. And it also, oh, I forgot to mention, it also had, so each page is like a description of, this one is Elena Serova, an aerospace engineer from Russia, and it has an illustration. So every page has a different style of illustration, because they're all done by different illustrators from the London College of Communication. So yeah, it's really cool. I like that one. I'm also reading, which I won't talk about too much because I'll probably chat about them more in my Women in Translation vlogs, which I'm doing. I'm finding vlogging at the moment a really handy way to video, because it means I don't have to organise time to be able to sit down in one spot, gather all the books I need, and deliver a presentation of some form with kids. I'm finding vlogging on the go a lot easier to fit into my day. The editing takes a bit longer, I suppose, but generally I'm finding it easier. But currently I'm reading Colette's The Vagabond, translated from the French by Stanley Appelbaum. I am enjoying it. I'm not that far in, but it's about a French divorcee called Renee, who is now, she was married to a famous painter, and now she's working as a mime in the vaudeville scene in Paris in the early 20th century, and she's unhappy. She's not unhappy, but she's trying to find her way so far. And I'm really enjoying the style. It's narrated in the first person in, I wouldn't say a total stream of consciousness style, but parts of it are. And yeah, I'm enjoying it so far. I'm also got distracted by yesterday, Mouthful of Birds by Samantha Schweblin, translated from the Spanish by McDowell. She's an Argentine writer, Samantha Schweblin. I find it really hard not to get tongue-tied when I say her name. And this is okay. It's okay. Like, some of the stories are great, some are fine. I'll talk about it more in the other video, but it seems to be the general consensus that, yeah, some are good and some are fine. So there's those two. And oh my gosh, the last one I'm reading, Americanah. I'm also loving this, but for some reason I just keep forgetting I'm in the middle of it, and then I pick up other books, and then I'm like, I'll get to this soon, but I will get to this soon. I want to get to it next month because I'm loving Women in Translation month. I'm really loving it, and reading so many books that I probably wouldn't have got to otherwise. I think I'm looking forward to just reading by whim instead of, I sort of have a TBR at the moment for Women in Translation, which is great. I'm actually sticking to it, which I never do, but I'm doing it, I think, because I've got the momentum of the vlogging and everyone else is doing it. And yeah, next week would be good. Next month to read by women. One of those things will be to get back into Americanah. I think that will be good. So, oh, and the other one, I'm listening to Michelle Obama's Becoming on audiobook. It's narrated by her. It's so good. I'm probably halfway through, and I reckon it's going to be a 5-star read. She's just so articulate about motherhood and its challenges, and working as a you know, being a working woman and a mother and being married to this really busy guy, but she's not afraid to talk about, like, she's like, yeah, Barack did all these things that really annoyed me and our marriage was really hard and we had to go to counselling. Like, she's so honest, but she's very self-reflective about her own limitations and her own strengths, and also all the stuff about her childhood, growing up in Southside Chicago, and all the amazing sort of community advocacy work she's done for the Black community in Chicago and beyond. You know, it's really cool. So I'm probably going to just start buying up copies to give to everyone for Christmas because I'm really, really loving it. So hopefully the next half is just as good. Well, let me know what you guys read, and if you've read any of the books I mentioned, as always, and we'll chat soon. Bye.